Daily Wire parted ways with Candace Owens. And part of it was things that she was saying that we felt were strongly anti-Semitic. And she was doing it in such a way that it was kind of hard to pin down. So I was trying to show where these things happen.
So I'm bemused because I've been involved in a lot of contracts in my time. I've been an employer, I've been an employee, and so on. I don't understand why somebody from the Daily Wire can be so explicit about the reasons you left, and yet you are not able to be as explicit to defend yourself or to counter what they're saying.
Amen, Piers. Amen. I think that is probably a question that was on a lot of people's minds. And, you know, what can I say other than what was it that Kanye was saying about contracts? And, you know, I think it is, even if you believe that it is valid for that to happen, I think it is immoral to allow someone to attack someone and to not allow them to defend their name. And so for me, Andrew actually rose to the level of defamation when he started claiming that I had actually said things that I had never said. I mean, he flagrantly lies, and I showed that on my platform when he pretended that I did an episode suggesting that Adolf Hitler burning books was a good thing. I wasn't even speaking about Adolf Hitler. It's a nonsense to think that I would do that on my platform.
But when you start saying things like some of those books Hitler burned weren't so bad, you know, I was shocked. This is something Candace actually said. I was surprised to learn that the books Hitler was burning or the Nazis were burning, they weren't good books. They were bad books. They were socialist books.
In my view, he's a pervert. Doesn't mean that his library or his institute should have been burned down. Doesn't mean that his library or his institute should have been burned down.
Doesn't mean that his library or his institute should have been burned down.
There's no excuse for burning down an institute. There it is, you guys. Does that sound like someone who's supporting the burning of books in any capacity? No. And that's why he never showed the clip, of course. Am I supposed to believe that he didn't have access to the clips and the statements that I made at the Daily Wire? That he's not subjected to the same fact-checking process that I was subjected to every day that I was at the Daily Wire? That he just couldn't find out what it was that I actually said? Of course he could. He just wanted to lie, and he wanted to smear me. And I think that that is awful. I think that's really awful. Flagrantly lies, and I showed that on my platform when he pretended that I did an episode suggesting that Adolf Hitler burning books was a good thing. I wasn't even speaking about Adolf Hitler. It's a nonsense to think that I would do that on my platform. And it's a trick also. It's meant to make people feel emotional and like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that she's supporting Adolf Hitler. And I thought it was nasty business. I thought it was extremely nasty business. And, you know, for me, Piers, it's important for me to state, my name means a lot to me. You know, my grandfather grew up on a sharecropping farm, one of 12 children, you know, in the segregated South, Robert Owens Sr. And for him to have worked the way that he worked and to have instilled the Christian values in me that he instilled in me growing up, the idea that I would allow someone to so flagrantly throw dirt on his name, it was never going to fly.
Did you ever say or do anything which to a Jewish ear could be construed as anti-Semitic?
Well, let's be clear about all of these topics, whether we're talking about racism, sexism, anti-Semitism, everything can be construed to an ear when you're talking about a subjective ear that I believe that this is racist. I mean, I could say, hey, Piers, you even asking me questions. And to me, it feels racist, right? A feeling and a fact are two different things. So what someone construes something is meaningless. Factually speaking, I have never said anything that is anti-Semitic. And had I have said something that was anti-Semitic, Andrew Klavan would have simply showed the clip.
Right. A lot of attention has been focused on you constantly referencing Christ is King.
And there is a substantial coterie of people, anti-Semites, people who hate Jewish people, who are using Christ the King as what the left would call a dog whistle. And they use it to spit at people. There are pictures of Nick Fuentes, who is a raving anti-Semite, shouting Christ the King in this kind of aggressive, pugilistic way to mean essentially Jews are screwed. You know, that's basically what they're saying.
Many people believing that although those words in themselves, if you're a Christian, as you are, would not be offensive, that to Jewish people, when they're being whipped up on social media, as they were at the time, by people who are genuine white supremacists and pretty brazen anti-Semites, that being smart as you are, you would have known that to deliberately use that phrase repeatedly in that time, in that climate, was a deliberate act of provocation to people like Ben Shapiro, who obviously are extremely high-profile Jewish people. Do you accept that?
I'm sorry, which time frame are you talking about when you say at that time?
Well, since the start of the Israel-Hamas war.
Yeah, no. So that phrase, if you're talking about when it began to be a scandal, because I think everyone was quite confused when there was suddenly this narrative that it could be construed as anti-Semitic, which is why it required so much explaining by people of when it became anti-Semitic. I posted a standalone Bible verse, this is just a pure fact, calling for peace. And at the end of the verse, I ended it and said, Christ is King, last November. Andrew Klavan references that. The reason why this even became a scandal is because of Andrew Klavan. Andrew Klavan did an episode called Because Christ is Really King. And then he accused me wrongly of spitting that phrase at a Jew. That simply never happened, as I showed in my first episode back. It was just made that up out of thin air. I posted a standalone Bible verse, and I wrote at the end of it, Christ is King. And then a Jew responded to me telling me to quit my job. So what happens sometimes is then time passes and people try to rewrite history, but we're not going to do revisionist history here. I tweeted Christ is King appropriately following a Bible verse when I was 38 weeks pregnant. And I stand by that proverb, and I stand by my declaring Christ to be King, as I have done many times in the past, because it's basic Christian doctrine.
Two things about that. Why would you tweet that particular passage from the Bible, ending Christ is King, on 14th of November 2023? What was your motivation?
Yeah, happy to answer that question. So if people remember what was happening at that time, Ben Shapiro was caught on a tape calling me faux sophisticated and some other stuff, you know, a disgrace, I think was the term. And again, I was 38 weeks pregnant, about to give birth. And my husband just told me, every media person in the world is contacting you globally, asking you to give a comment, to say something. It's obviously a very traumatizing thing to go through in the moment when you're that pregnant and suddenly you're like, I just don't want to deal with this drama. I don't mean like trauma in the very leftist, I feel traumatized by this, but just it's a lot happening leading up to birth. And my husband told me to read the Bible. He said, just read the Bible. You don't have to answer these media members. You don't have to give a comment. You don't have to say anything. These things are all fickle. It doesn't matter.
But just to be clear on the chronology, because the video of Ben saying what he said, we said, I think her behaviour during this has been disgraceful, without a doubt. I think her faux sophistication.
That came first.
Yeah, that came out on 15th of November 2023. But you had posted what you posted on the 14th of November.
That's not correct. You have your timeline wrong. It was the video came first.
So you were responding directly to the video?
No, I'm trying to finish the story, but you just have just so you know, chronologically, you have it wrong. His insult came first. I think it was on the 12th, the insult came.
Were you made aware of the insult? Because and then did it become public? I found out on Twitter with everybody else.
It was just trending, you know? And so just to go back into it, my husband told me to read the Bible and to realize that these things are fickle and that all of these journalists that were asking me to respond to them are doing it because all they want is clicks and money, and they want you, they want to use you for a moment that's not going to matter in the scheme of things in your life. And so I wanted to respond to all of these media members by saying that I'm calling for peace. You know, Christ is King of my heart. I don't need this right now. So that was it.
So there you have it, you guys. Candace didn't actually say anything, but this person, Nick Fuentes, also said Christ is King years before Candace. And apparently Andrew Klavan thinks that Nick Fuentes wrote the New Testament. And so anytime you are going to use Christ is King, Jesus is King, you be sure that you recognize his Hitler dog logic. Do you have a dog? Do you guys have a dog? Did you know that Hitler also had a dog? Have you disavowed Hitler today with your dog? Yeah, well, then that would make you a Hitler lover. That is straight up leftist logic. And I love how he attributes that to the left. He's like, well, the left would call this a dog whistle. Apparently the woke right would call that a dog whistle as well, a Hitler dog whistle. You're just basically attaching me to someone for absolutely no reason throughout multiple interviews for no other reason than the fact that you personally have issues with that person because of the way that they have attacked you. It is ridiculous. But you know what? In the scheme of all of this, I can't even be that upset with Andrew because I think he attacked himself in the process. He showed his own character. As he was trying to attack mine, he revealed his own character. But you have to ask yourself, what gave Andrew the courage to lie so belligerently? Other than the fact that, by the way, the person in charge of fact-checking at the Daily Wire, the general counsel, is his son-in-law. So I think that probably helped it get through the fact checks. His married to Andrew's son. But what else gave him the courage? Well, what was it that Kanye was saying about the contracts? He must have known that I couldn't reply. He must have felt comfortable knowing that I could not say anything to defend my own name and my own honor, but he tripped into something different when he started lying on me in a way that rose to the level of defamation. And so I can defend myself against you, Andrew. I can defend myself against you. So many of you guys sent me emails. We're just completely inundated with emails of people asking, how can we support you? And it's one thing to be like, hey, we want a donation. It's another thing for us to be able to create a product which will help support this show in all of the ways that it is growing. You guys, I am introducing Standis cups, not to be confused with a Stanley Cup. The first one that I am going to sign is going to go to Andrew Klavan. On the front here, we have the show logo, and it says, Christ is King. And yes, indeed, the back says woke right tears.
So in the build-up to this, you'd already made it clear that you'd said on Twitter on November the 3rd, no government anywhere has a right to commit a genocide ever. There is no justification for a genocide. I can't believe this even needs to be said or is even considered the least bit controversial to state. You didn't say what you were talking about in that tweet, but it was widely assumed to be Gaza and what Israel was doing in Gaza. Is that correct? Were you talking about Israel there?
No, actually, when I wrote that tweet, if you look right before that tweet, I had retweeted and liked something from a journalist named Yashar Ali. He had shared a clip of a Congressman, Brian Mast, who got up on a platform and said that there's no such thing as an innocent Palestinian life. That is despicable, genocidal language. And I am paraphrasing here, but Yashar Ali said, and he's pro-Israel, by the way, if I'm judging by what he puts online, he said, can we all just admit that this language is unacceptable? And I tweeted that no government in the world, and I was actually commenting on America, genocide is always wrong. And so, by the way, even if I was talking about Israel or I was talking about Palestine, that statement should hold.
No, I agree.
There is
I agree,
no
but just
justification
no,
ever
I agree,
in
I
the
agree,
world
but for the record,
genocide. So
I agree.
I was very surprised to see that tweet go viral and people so angry about it. I was actually overseas at the moment. I was in the UK. And so it seemed very strange to me that people would have a problem with it no matter what side you're on. But in that particular moment, I was talking about Brian Mast, and on my show, my very next show, I clarified that.
And do you think, for the record, that what Israel's been doing constitutes genocide?
Well, what I've been having trouble is all of the people that are pro-Israel and say it's not a genocide won't tell me what is a genocide. What percentage of a population has to be killed before we can use the word genocide? It's a funny little thing. They won't tell you. They won't tell you what constitutes genocide. So I would like a clear understanding of how many Palestinians have to die before we are allowed to term it a genocide. All of the experts can't agree on what a genocide actually is, but they love to float around the word on virtually every other issue. You know, I had Rabbi Barclay on my show on one of my last shows when I was on the Daily Wire, and I asked him that question pointedly: what is genocide? Let us know, experts, what percentage of the population of Palestinians has to be killed before we are allowed to say that is genocide. What I can tell you is I am completely uncomfortable and utterly against the amount of Palestinian innocent lives that have been lost in this conflict, particularly children. And any person who is fearful of stating that the death of innocent children has been utterly unacceptable is a coward.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I completely agree, but do you personally think it constitutes genocide, which is the
Well,
deliberate...
what I'm saying to you is
Well, I
quite
can tell you
literally,
what the-
I
I can tell
have
you what the-
pursued on my show.
Yeah.
What is the number?
No, I understand.
What is the official number? That's it. I mean, somebody tell me and I'll give you an answer.
Well, I don't think there is a
Try
specific...
it. Try it when you have,
Well, it's not about
you
a
have tons
number.
of people on
It's a-
both sides of the debate on.
Yeah, but it's not... It's not
No,
yeah,
no. What do you
I
mean it's
have
not a
done
number?
that. Here's my answer.
And do they give you an answer?
Well, no, because here's the point. It's not about specific numbers. It's about an intent.
But it has to be.
Well, no, it's not. It's about an intent to eradicate
That's
a
not true, Piers, because in America, they say that Native Americans, it was a genocide committed by white men. This is what they say, right?
No, but I'm
Do you
talking
agree
about
with
what
that?
I'm talking about what the definition of a genocide is.
But what I'm telling you is that would be incorrect because the majority of Native Americans died from smallpox. It was accidental. Some 90% of the Native Americans that lived here died from smallpox, and it's considered a genocide.
No, I understand. I'm telling you what the definition of genocide is, which is not about a specific number in any circumstance. It's about an intent to target and eradicate a whole people based on their ethnicity.
I'm disputing that by telling you that they legally say within America that Native Americans, a genocide was committed against Native Americans. Factually speaking, 90% of them, 90 to 93% of them died from smallpox. So it was actually an epidemic, right? So is the definition shifting? Because it is my understanding from Rabbi Barclay that the definition of anti-Semitism shifts. So maybe the definition of genocide has shifted.
Could you provide for us a definition of anti-Semitism?
Absolutely. I really appreciate that because I think that is the break. If we're not speaking the same language, where can we go, right? So there's a man, a blessed memory man named Lord Jonathan Sachs, who was the chief rabbi of England. He had a great line. He really defined anti-Semitism. That anti-Semitism is Jews have no right to exist collectively as Jews with the same rights as other human beings. Which is kind of a weird statement. So let's just track back to understand the history of anti-Semitism. 2,000 years ago, Jews don't accept Jesus as Messiah. For people who do not have faith, as the early Christians, as some of them have faith, some of them accept Jesus, but they don't really in their heart. And you and I both know people like Rob McCoy who accepts it fully in their heart, and other people who are doing it without faith. And those who have less faith, the fact that a Jew exists, let alone thrives, is a threat to their faith, because how can the Jew not accept Jesus as God and still thrive? Unless he's associated with the devil. So you start having these myths that are created of the Jew being identified with the opposite of God. This really codifies in 1144 in Norwich, England, what's called the Blood Libel. This is really important to understand, especially today in 2024. In 1144, a young boy is killed, and the local priest says that's because the Jews need to make their matzah with Christian blood. It's called the Blood Libel. It's blaming the problems of other people on the Jew. It's just so you know, that's so ridiculous, not only just on its face, but we're forbidden from even having meat that has any blood in it. This is a Torah law. You can't have, that's why, we can't have steak tartare, okay? So this gets perpetuated in combination with a 4th century, what's called the Vulgate.
I'm sorry, did you say in 1140 this happened?
1144 in Norwich, England.
Okay.
This is after in the 4th century, you have something called the Vulgate. The Vulgate is the official translation of the Bible. In Hebrew, there's no vowels. And the person who translates, St. Jerome, who translates the Vulgate, knows what he's doing is translating wrong. He puts down that when Moses comes down from Mount Sinai, he has horns, okay, Karen, when actually the word was Karan, meaning that light shone from his head. So now by 1144, you have the anti-Semitic myth of Jews have horns and they drink blood. And I know people who've been asked when they went into the army and other places, can I see your horns? So this still exists today in 2024 throughout America. And I don't mean just in little rural areas. It exists today, these myths. That Vulgate Bible is the official Catholic Bible all the way through the 1970s. So it is, you need to understand that that's a piece of it, okay? That they're equated with this kind of hate. Because it's about Jews not having the right to exist collectively, when they live in their little communities in the Middle Ages, anti-Semitism is a hate against their religion. By the time you get to the 18th and 20th centuries, when so many Jews have assimilated, they are in culture, they are in arts, they're in science, it's no longer against them for their religion, it's against them for their race. Because anti-Semitism is the oldest hate in the world, and the hate that mutates.
So is the definition shifting? Because it is my understanding from Rabbi Barclay that the definition of anti-Semitism shifts. So maybe the definition of genocide has shifted, but
let me read you the exact
school.
Let me read you the exact wording and see whether you think it applies to. Well, let me read you the exact definition of genocide from the Oxford English Dictionary: the deliberate killing of a large number of people from a particular nation or ethnic group with the aim of destroying that nation or group. So by that definition, do you believe that is what's happening to the Palestinian people and it's being perpetrated by Israel?
Well, I would say is that Israel has proven in the past that they can be very specific when they want to get somebody out, whether that's a hostage or any other certain military operation. And what I am seeing happening, forgetting the specific language of a genocide, is something that I'm using my platform to speak out against, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter to me what the media calls me. I've had every headline. I do not believe that they are being careful in what they are doing. I think it has been it seems to me that the destruction of the hospitals and the schools and of the UN buildings. Would you say, Piers, that you believe that's unintentional?
I do not believe Israel's waging genocide. I think that
you believe, but I'm asking you, do you believe that the targeting room to room in the hospitals
Well, no,
is
I'll be
intentional?
clear with you. I can answer the question. I have said repeatedly in the last few weeks and months that I think the proportionality of Israel's response is now unacceptable, and particularly since they decided to go into Rafah, a refugee camp that they set up, to then target Hamas in the middle of a refugee camp where you're bound to kill so many innocent civilians in the process, I think is unacceptable. But I'm just curious, given that you tweeted about genocide and no government ever has a right to do it, whether by your calculation from that definition, what Israel is doing is deliberately killing a large number of people from a particular nation or ethnic group with the aim of destroying that nation or group.
Yeah, well, what I can say to you, again, because these definitions shift, I don't think we need to focus on the word, because I'm telling you what I believe. And my belief is that they are not being careful whatsoever. My belief is that there has been too much loss of Palestinian life.
But that's different to genocide, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but okay, that's fine. We don't need to. That's what I'm saying. I don't know why you're obsessing over this one word. It doesn't matter.
Well, because you tweeted about genocide.
You told me.
I'm only trying to clear up.
The tweet is about Brian Mast. So you're harping on this issue. There's a lot more topics we should talk about. I'm being very clear in how I feel about this issue. The Israeli government is not being careful in how they're dealing with this. I agree with you that the amount of death has been completely unacceptable. When I tweeted that was back in November. So we're talking way more lives that have been lost, and that tweet was about Brian Mast. So
I get it. Now, here's my reason.
Never imagined the amount of dead Palestinian children that I would see on my X feed since then.
It's horrific.
It's heartbreaking to me as a mother. It's horrific to me that the media seems almost complicit in the dehumanization of Palestinians, and I will not be on that side, because at the end of the day, the hit pieces, the name calling, the anti-Semitism, the psychopathic language that seems to be coming out of people means nothing. And I want to make sure everybody knows this, right? At the end of the day, you are going to have to account to God for the things that you allowed, for the things that you were complicit in, and for the things that you did not have enough courage to state.
Okay.
The amount of death of Palestinian children has been unacceptable, full stop.
Okay.
Bibi Netanyahu, in my view, should not be given an invitation to Congress. I think it's unacceptable.
I agree.
Unacceptable.
I don't
and
think
to be clear, for whatever the reason,
he shouldn't be leader
when it comes
Israel.
to the topic of Israel, it does seem that journalists are fearful to critique Israel.
Well, I'm not
now,
at
why
all.
is that? Because I would say, Piers, that you seem a little fearful to critique Israel and to want to always seem that you're coming across a little bit understanding of everything they're doing. What is it that makes journalists, corporate journalists,
let me respond.
fearful of saying, hey, Israel has done a ton of things that have been very wrong?
Yes, and I have said they're wrong. I think Netanyahu should go. I think half of that cabinet should go, because some of them have definitely been using genocidal language. I think a lot of what Israel's been doing in the last few weeks is completely unacceptable. But ultimately, I also, from the start of this conflict, believe that Israel not only had a right to defend itself after the terror attack on October the 7th, but a fundamental duty to its people. And here's where I'm just curious about your tweeting through this procedure, this whole war, because on October the 7th, you didn't tweet anything. You didn't tweet anything on October the 8th. And October the 9th, you tweeted, so much world peace ever since we got the orange man out of office. So glad the adults are back in charge. A lot of people say, well, if you care this much about innocent people being killed, why didn't you say anything when 1,200 people were massacred to death in the most brutal, barbaric manner in this awful terror attack by Hamas, and nearly 7,000 more were wounded, some of them catastrophically and irreparably? Why did that not compel you to say anything?
Well, first and foremost, Israel's a foreign country, so typically I talk about topics that have to do with America. Secondly, you're only quoting my Twitter feed. I'm also on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram. I also had a daily podcast in which I did respond directly about what happened and called the events horrific. Multiple times, said what Hamas did was absolutely horrific. So you're using a snapshot of my Twitter feed where you're acknowledging that I didn't tweet for days to suggest that I didn't have anything to say about what had happened. Now, to be clear, I am consistent on all matters. I do not want America involved whatsoever in anything that is happening in Israel. I don't want my dollars sent over to Israel. We should not be supporting Israel. Obviously, Thomas Massey has done a lot of work showing how it doesn't even make economic sense that we have so much debt and yet we're sending money over to support Israel. And the biggest issue, by the way, that I have with Israel in talking about them being above reproach is the fact that they are supplying the arms to murder Christians.
Well, it is a race against time to prevent genocide in a little-known area of the world. Some lawmakers are calling on the Biden administration to recognize that 120,000 Armenian Christians may soon face extinction. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales joins us now with more on the effort to save those believers. It is a story that we have been following very closely here on EWTN News Nightly. Eric?
Well, good evening, Trace. You know, Congressman Chris Smith is a co-chair of the House's Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission. He held a hearing last week, and he says that thousands of Armenian Catholics have been sealed off from food and medicine and face starvation in a disputed area that Armenia and Azerbaijan have been fighting over for decades.
This horrible crime, this crime of genocide, was planned, tested and imposed by the government of Azerbaijan, that it is to say by President Aliyev, who rules Azerbaijan with an iron fist as a dictator.
Hey folks, Eric Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast. It's considered by many to be the world's oldest Christian nation, with its embrace of the faith dating back over 1,700 years. It also suffered a horrific genocide in the 20th century at the hands of Ottoman Turks. Armenia is a small nation with a very consequential history. Today it's locked in a bitter territorial dispute with its Muslim neighbor Azerbaijan over an area known as Nagorno-Karabakh. Now, the two nations even went to war over the region in 2020, and now more than 120,000 Christian Armenians there are currently suffering under an ongoing blockade.
Joining me now, Armin Georgian, our international affairs editor. Armin, Turkey isn't the only international player exerting its influence in the region. Israel has also been backing Azerbaijan militarily. That's created a rift between Israel and Armenia. Tell us more.
Yeah, this is an aspect of the conflict that we haven't talked about very much so far, but it's true that Armenia only opened an embassy in Israel in September, and it's already recalled its ambassador because of these Israeli arms sales to Azerbaijan. Those arms sales, according to the president of Azerbaijan, amounted to 4.1 billion euros at current prices. So that was President Aliyev who mentioned this in 2016. And Israeli media has talked about the actual systems that Israel has sold to Azerbaijan, these Elbit systems, which are very sophisticated. And according to some defense analysts, they are actually shifting the military balance in the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, including these so-called suicide drones that can destroy a target on impact. So these arms sales obviously have been a cause of huge concern for Nagorno-Karabakh, the unrecognized republic, and for the Republic of Armenia itself. The irony of Israel helping an adversary of Armenia is not lost on some Israeli intellectuals. They have published an open letter in the last couple of days, around 15 signatories. I'll just read you a quick quote from that, because this is quite interesting. They say, one needs to question Israel's role in an armament effort aimed mainly against a people that, like the Jewish people, suffered genocidal attacks in the 20th century. We call upon other Israelis to raise their voice on this important issue.
Well, in other military news, Azerbaijan has reportedly been using Israeli weapons in their latest clash with Armenia. An assistant to the Azeri president confirming the use of Israeli drones to Walla News on Wednesday. While he affirmed the use of the drones, he added he doesn't expect Israel to vocally support the Azeris in the conflict, but that there are many agreements behind the scenes. Now ongoing for almost a week, the heavy fighting that broke out over the separatist region of Nagorno-Karabakh is the biggest escalation in years, and dozens have been killed.
And the biggest issue, by the way, that I have with Israel in talking about them being above reproach is the fact that they are supplying the arms to murder Christians, okay? In Armenia, the oldest Christian country in the world, and yet nobody talks about that. For whatever reason, it seems to be the circumstance that when Jewish people die in Israel, it's wall-to-wall coverage. But when Christians die all over the world, nobody talks about it. Everyone wants to correlate everything to World War II. Everyone wants to talk about Adolf Hitler, and rightfully so, he was a horrific person. But nobody wants to talk about Henryk Yagoda, right? Nobody wants to talk about the Bolsheviks. Nobody wants to talk about the Christian Holocaust. I am tired of the media, exhausted of the media not speaking about what is happening to Christians all around the world. And it is especially horrific, while at the exact same time that it is happening, the slaughter of Christians in Armenia, the arms being supplied by Israel, that the media turns the other way and says, oh, okay, but what about what's happening in Israel? So you know what I'm asking for? Actual equality. Okay, because it seems like this is like a special category, the special relationship that we have. I'm a Christian first, okay? And so my concerns are going to be with what's happening to Christians all around the world, because it is us. We are the #1 most persecuted religion in the world. And all Christians watching this need to realize the time is now to start speaking up, because we have been silenced about the things that are happening to us for a very long time. And the media is very clearly not our friend. When there is wall-to-wall coverage of Christians being killed in Armenia, Christians being killed in Nigeria, and the treatment of Christians in America and all across the globe today, then you ask me if I will use my platform and I will use my voice to speak about what's happening in Israel. How about that?
And you know what else, Jim? I just want to say this to our Christian friends, you know, just to call it as it is and say it straight out, you know, you guys are worshiping one Jew. That's a mistake. You should be worshiping every single one of us, because we all die for your sins every single day. And that's exactly what's going on here. Yeah. We're all God's firstborn, and we're dying for your sins right now because the Jewish people in the land of Israel are the bulwark against the orcs. Okay? The orcs are coming not to a theater near you, but to your home.
Have 6 billion idol worshippers who makes God angry every second of their life. Indian, Chinese, Japanese, Tibet, Nepal, Thailand. So many. India alone is 500 million. China is 2 billion. So many. 2 billion Christians, which are idol worshippers. Between Chinese, Hindus, Buddhists, and Christian, at least 6.5 billion people are idol worshippers that, according to the Torah, do not have the right to live. Idol worshipper goy, it's death penalty. Not only Jews, even a goy who bow down to an idol, who believe in JC, deserve death penalty.
The final question I'll ask you on this issue of the Daily Wire. centres around the Christ is King, because it had long been a core slogan of people like Nick Fuentes and other, for want of a better phrase, white supremacists, white nationalists, whatever you want to call them. The Daily Wire co-founder Jeremy Boring said on X, "How is saying Christ is King anti-Semitic? The same way anything becomes anti-Semitic when it's used for the purpose of expressing anti-Semitism. It's like asking, how does a shovel become a murder weapon when it's used to murder someone? This isn't hard. A shovel is not innately a murder weapon. Saying Christ is King is not innately anti-Semitic. It's all about how a thing is used. Saying Christ is King for an evil purpose, like using it as a weapon to express your hatred or disdain for the Jews, is a grave sin. God will not be mocked. Invoking him in vain self-promotion or to troll Jews or to attack your political rivals is to carry forth his name in vain." What would your response be to that?
My response would be that I am an unapologetic free market capitalist. I think Jeremy Boring, as the co-CEO of Daily Wire, went to the market with his idea on Christ is King, and the market has a right to respond. They believe in what he's saying, and they think that what he is saying is true and is right, then they will support the Daily Wire and they will support their mission. If they believe that it is wrong, then they will stop supporting the Daily Wire. I can't speak on behalf of Jeremy Boring. You'd have to book him, and he can talk more about his belief that Christ is King. It can be used like a shovel to murder people. You know, what I would say for me is I don't agree with that. And so if you find me saying Christ is King to be abhorrent, same thing. You don't have to support me. You don't have to follow me. But let me tell you, I'm going to continue to declare that Jesus Christ is the King of Kings.
Nick Fuentes, who is a Holocaust denier, supported you in what he said was your full-fledged war against the Jews. He said, "This is the face of a total Jewish defeat. We effing got your back, Candace. They're filth." What would you say to that?
I would never, ever, ever describe Jewish people as a whole as filth. I don't know what the context of that is. Is he referring to the Rabbi Barclay interview? But just to be clear, on my record here, I have had wonderful relationships with Jewish people all throughout my life. Before I was at Daily Wire, I was at PragerU. Dennis Prager, Marissa Straight run that company. Marissa Straight is a former IDF soldier. That woman treated me like gold. We never had any issues whatsoever. They were wonderful to me. So I genuinely don't know the context of where or why he said that, but I'm just acknowledging that he said the word filth and that I used the word filth to describe Rabbi Shmuley, who you have had on this show. And I just want to make it clear to everyone watching that Rabbi Shmuley is in fact a piece of filth.
Kosher sex, on the cover you see it's great sex is a calculated performance and kosher sex is a total submission to instinct where you just let yourself go.
Hi everyone, out of an abundance of gratitude to our friend and brother Muhammad Ishab, who debated me on Piers Morgan. Millions of people watched it. Intimacy company McConnell runs based on my book. He gave us international promotion, and in recognition, what are we doing for him?
So we're gonna have the Muhammad Hijab discount, and you can put in a promo code at the end of checkout.
And as you check out, if you're buying a vibrator, he kept on bringing up vibrators in the debate. If you're buying lubricants, he kept on bringing up lubricants. Hannah, in the regular classes that you and I do and the advice we give people writing in, a lot of them are men who are dealing with a lot of aggression in their lives, a lot of false machismo. They know that they're
Overcompensating.
They're overcompensating, and they're overcompensating because they feel that they're kind of miniature in a physical department, when they really should not feel bad about that.
I actually did a post on this.
Sex in Judaism provides the most intimate way of knowing someone, and I think especially in marriage, it's very hard to maintain lust. And so I wanted products to bring to people that don't substitute their husband or their wife. It's something that can enhance the experience.
Let's say a lesbian or a gay couple come in, is there a different message for them? Because I know some religious groups might not be so accepting.
Anyone who believes in commitment and bringing love into this world and being intimate with someone and wants to learn, they're welcome here. It does say in the Torah that there are issues with homosexuality, but you know, my dad, we were always brought up with the idea that if, you know, there's 613 mitzvot for everyone to keep, and if you can't keep one, you keep this, or two, or whatever it is, whatever number, you keep the rest and you do as much as you can. That's Judaism.
It's a day of celebration. We feel bad for Candace Owens that she lost her job, so I figure with her image of what Jews are supposed to look like. Why not at least validate her? I am dressed up as a Candace Owens Jew. Now, this is not a Christian child, it's a Jewish child. But if it would be, I got my Christian blood. Spicy, delicious. I got my Jewish nose. I have filth, because Jews are all filth. And more than anything else, what does Adi have? Money!
So a reasonable question is, do you feel uncomfortable about having support from people like Nick Fuentes then?
I think it is a absolute nonsense for people. I have on Twitter alone 5.5 million followers. I think it's pointedly ridiculous when people do this and they find a comment and they go, do you feel uncomfortable about the fact that this person said this? I've had the FBI working with me because there are people that read my tweets and believe that we are in a relationship. I had a person who literally left a mental facility because he thought every single one of my tweets was a sign of love and I was speaking in code to him. What I'm not going to do is respond to this tactic of pretending that I'm somehow responsible for the 20 million followers and that I should be knowing what they are saying on their private platforms or their personal platforms or their public platforms every minute of every day. It's a nonsense. You know it's nonsense right now, Piers. If I went into your comments and dug it up and said, do you support this? And it's just, let's just not do that.
Well, no,
hold
but
me accountable for the things.
Hold
me accountable
Nick
for the
Fuentes is
things
not
that
just
I
one
say.
of your 20 million followers. Nick Fuentes has millions of followers himself.
Where does he have, no, stop. Where does he have millions of followers? What platform?
Multiple platforms.
No. He's banned.
He's banned from.
This is what this is. This is very interesting to me because
he's banned from X now. Yeah, he wasn't before.
He does not have. No. He was actually. He does not have. He was banned from YouTube. He was banned from X. He was banned from what is the. He's literally been banned from everywhere. So when you say something like that, I'm asking you which platform. You just made a statement. He has millions of followers.
Well, what I
think you're being hyperbolic.
Yeah.
Which platform does Nick Fuentes have millions of followers on? Which platform does Nick Fuentes have millions of followers on?
Well, he doesn't now. He's been banned.
No. Where? Which platform did he ever have millions of followers on? He is on X. He does not have millions of followers. So which platform did he ever have millions of followers on?
Well, how many followers has he got?
Okay, so you don't even know the answer. So you're just being hyperbolic again.
Well,
you're creating this argument that I am responsible.
My point was not about a specific number of his followers.
No, he's not just. He's got millions of followers. That's just not true.
He has a follower.
Piers, it's just simply not true.
Candace,
I answered your question again. You asked me a statement about what he said, and if I agreed with it, I told you no. I would never want a war against the Jews.
No, but my question was,
do you
feel
ask me what I think and ask me whether I want to respond to something, whether I agree with something.
My question was, do you feel uncomfortable about him supporting you? He's a high-profile person, and he said that. Do you feel comfortable, given the context of how you left the Daily Wire and their belief?
I want to be clear.
Yeah.
I do not know what is the context of what you just said to me. As I just said to you, if it was pertaining to Rabbi Shmuley, who I think is a piece of filth, who has gotten away with everything in the media, then I am grateful that people are understanding that that man has harassed me for 2 years. And I am grateful that for any person that has supported me in responding to Rabbi Shmuley and his hag daughter, okay? If you are going to pointedly ask me if I am uncomfortable with the fact that Nick Fuentes also believes that Christ is king, I want every single person in the world to declare Christ is king, whether you believe them to be a Nazi, a white supremacist, a Jew, a Muslim. It is the phrase itself that I want declared, okay? That's it. That's it, okay?
What's your thoughts? Please be respectful with your comments. Also, please click the like, click the notification bell, and subscribe to this channel.
Listen, Genesis chapter 11 verse 10 explains the genealogy of Shem. Shem was a black man in Africa. If you repeat this back, Genesis 14 verse 13, Abraham steps on the scene. Being a descendant of Shem, which is a fact, means Abraham too was black. Abraham, born in the city of a black man, called Nimrod, grandson of Ham. Ham had 4 sons. One was named Canaan. Here, let me do some explaining. Abraham, Isaac was Jacob had 12 sons. For real, and these were the children of Israel, according to Genesis chapter 10. These were the children of Israel, according chapter 10. These were the children of Israel, according to Genesis chapter 10.